If you remember a few weeks ago, I had done an unboxing on this modified pulling tractor. This is from Outlaw Trophy Resins, and I finally got a chance to put it together. And as you can see, with it being a tractor, I went with some traditional John Deere colors. Black, yellow, and green. Only I put my little twist on it to make it my own. First things first though, you gotta give this thing a bath. My go-to is Dawn dish soap. That stuff has absolutely no problem washing diesel oil off me, so any leftover resin is going to be no match for it. So I just pat everything dry the best I can, then set it all off to the side and let it air dry overnight. Before we move into paint, we got just a little bit of cleanup work to do. It is a very good print overall. However, over these large flat items, it's going to show some layer lines. It's almost unavoidable. The good news is that resin is relatively soft, so it is extremely easy to sand. And this nail file from the dollar store, it fits these contours perfectly. When you get to the point where it will no longer catch your fingernail, that's really all the sanding you need to do. So after about 10 minutes, you should have a piece that's as smooth as this. Now, I will warn you that resin is extremely dusty, so clean your work area often. I might even go as far as to recommend wearing a mask. So after you get the fender cleaned up, same old, you got to go clean up all the witness marks from the supports. They clean up just as easily though. It's just a few passes with an emery board. I don't know what kind of resin this guy uses, but it cleans up extremely well. I'm really impressed by it. Now as far as resin goes, not a lot of primer will stick to it. My go-to has always been an etching primer, so to speak. To me, a primer, it will work on literally anything. I highly recommend it. As usual, just 2 or 3 light coats, that's all you need. I will apologize in advance. The lights in my paint booth here, they're creating this weird kind of reflection on my camera. So I pointed it down ever so slightly. I didn't realize how high I paint, so some of this is going to be off camera. I'm sorry, I really am. For the green, I'm going to be using Tamiya's TS22 Light Green. Now, as I said earlier, I'm going to be going with traditional John Deere colors, but with my own little twist. This lime green is probably one of my favorite colors, so it's what I'm using. I'm making it my own. And again, I'm off camera. I apologize. I didn't realize moving my camera just an teeny bit would affect this so much. You're not missing much though. 2 to 3 coats, just like anything else. Now I will be doing this whole piece in carbon fiber, so I'm going to be laying down a base coat of black. I like to use black base coat in the off chance that the decal shifts while it's drying and exposes some of the bare plastic underneath. If it's black, it's a whole lot less noticeable. Just ignore this bit here. Plans changed, as you'll see later on in the video. This will be my first time using Tamiya's lacquer paints. I'm kind of excited. It uh it lays out just like any other paint. I will note that it does seem to cover a whole lot better than just a regular acrylic paint. That might be why it's in a smaller jar. We could get more coverage with less paint. For the John Deere yellow color, I'm going to be using some carbon Kevlar. Unfortunately, I spent a lot of time here making these templates and laying out this decal, only to realize that once I put the fender and the tire on, you're not going to see this area. That is totally okay though, because you and I both know that this is there, and we took the time to make even the hidden parts worth looking at. What I did though, just anything that was a flat part, I covered with that decal. Now, for one of my trademarks or specialties, whatever you guys want to call it, I posted a teaser on my Instagram and everyone's like, oh yeah, of course, carbon fiber. So as you may notice, there's a little bitty tick mark there. That is the halfway point. I like to do the opposed carbon fiber or bookend or match end, matchbook, whatever it's called. I, I don't know the legal name of this carbon fiber layout. What I do know though, however, is to lay it out and make it look fairly decent. Now before I make that decal permanent, I'm going to do a little sanity check. The fender is 87 millimeters wide, so we are right there at 43 and a half. For the sake of brevity, I cut out the vast majority of me laying out these decals. You guys have seen me do it before, so I'm going to jump straight to the last bit here. For those of you that are new, or just kind of found your way here, if you search my videos for the McLaren 570 build, I go into a whole lot more detail about how I made the templates and laid out these decals. So if you're interested, go check it out. Or, if you want, go watch any other builder on YouTube. I think just about everybody has done a tutorial on it by now. Anytime you have a decal that you're going to clear coat over, it is a very good idea to do a very light mist coat to quote unquote prime the decal. I'm going to set this back up here for about 15 minutes to dry. Then I'm going to oh no, where did it go? That tape let go and this piece fell down onto the hard concrete and met its demise. It was a very clean break though. It broke right here and then carried right along down the peak of that fender. It also got some nastiness from the garage floor stuck into the clear coat right there. So I just used some 2-part epoxy on the back only to glue it together. I didn't want any squeeze out on the top where we got our carbon fiber decals laid out, because there would be no way to hide any of that squeeze out. So instead, what I'm going to do is I'm going to lay down about maybe, I think it was 7 coats of clear. I really hosed it on because I want a lot of clear on there just so I have enough material to sand it all back and polish it out. It is finally time to wipe all the wax off this to see how it turned out. If you look real close right here, you will see just a faintest line of where it had broken. Well, it's obvious on the back, but on the display part, you can't even tell. For those of you curious, Meguiar's cleaner wax is what I'm using right now. It's got just a little bit of abrasive in it, so it also polishes as it waxes. Now, although I am very happy with how this ended up turning out, I am kind of disappointed that all the layers of clear coat had kind of drowned out the carbon fiber pattern. This is probably one of the smoothest transitions I've ever accomplished. I'm extremely happy with the way this turned out. The headers, to me, they needed just a little bit of work. What I did was some step drilling to make them just a little bit more realistic. Luckily, the way these were printed, they came with a pilot hole. So all I did was drill them out, periodically turning my workpiece to make sure I'm still going straight. I dug into it about 1/4 of an inch. Anything deeper than that and we can't tell, so don't waste your time. And all I did here was basic metal fab 101. I drill a smaller hole and then I work my way up to a bigger hole. Now, even though we do have pilot holes to guide us, I still recommend periodically rotating your workpiece to make sure you're still going straight. Again, we're only going down about 1/4 of an inch, so I'm going to blow all that out of there and see how we're looking. Alright, 63 more to cut. I am drilling another hole here because one thing I do want on this build is steering. Even though most of the steering is done with those two pedals right there, we still have to pull our way into the staging lanes. So I'm just using a piece of round evergreen to make that steering shaft. What I would love to have seen was an actual steering shaft with some U-joints in it. Ultimately though, the way I have this ran with the engines and the crossbox, most of it will be hidden and still look convincing. In doing this, I had to cut a little portion of the stock steering wheel a little bit shorter. Overall though, I think it's worth it. I want the valve covers to be the same green as the actual chassis. Problem being that I used a rattle can, so everything around it also came up green. So once the color sits and I'm happy with it, I'm going to mask off the valve covers and paint the rest of the engine assembly. As I mentioned in the unboxing a few weeks ago, I wished a lot of this would have been printed in separate parts. Wishful thinking, anybody can mask this off and do what they want to do. It just would have been easier to paint everything separately. Ultimately though, it's not a big deal. Masking is easy. It's just somewhat wasteful of all the materials we need to use to mask everything off. To me, a rattle can, it is a solvent-based paint, so I'm going to use another solvent-based paint to go over it. In this case, I'm going to be using Splash Paint's Apollo Silver. If any of you have built up the new Platts Audi R8, you should already have some of this on hand. I do recommend keeping some of this on hand because it makes a very convincing aluminium color. For the headers in the fuel tank, I want them to look like stainless steel. To get that look, I'm going to be using metallizers from Vallejo sprayed directly over primer. What they recommend is using a gloss black to spray over. So if we just skip that step entirely and spray it directly over bare primer, it'll be a little bit dull. Now looking at reference photos, the clutch housings and the crossbox, they're all this kind of a raw steel color. For those of you curious, magnesium is a perfect match color for it. By this time though, everything has had plenty of time to dry. It's finally time to peel off all the masking tape and see if everything had turned out. Get off of me. This, yeah, you know what? I'm happy. This is going to work out just fine. If you remember earlier what I had mentioned that plans had changed, these blower hats is where things had changed. I had ordered a whole bunch of aftermarket goodies. I had a lot of AN fittings, some braided line. I was actually going to do a bunch of injectors and everything in the blower hat there. None of it is here yet, and I'm getting tired of just looking at this thing. I wanted to get it built. In the meantime, though, I have a plan, and it's all going to revolve around that little hole right there. If you look at the chassis here, it also has a few holes drilled into it. The plan is to pin these engines in place so they're not mounted permanently. So when, or should I say if, all the aftermarket goodies come in, I can just easily take all the engines off and add all the plumbing later on. So I guess going forward, essentially we're going to be doing a box stock build. Other than the paint and my decals, this is going to be exactly as it comes from Outlaw Trophy Resins. Except for this is still a piece that I added. At this point, all the hard work is done, so it's finally time just to start putting everything together. This is what I was talking about earlier when I said I'm going to pin in these engines. They sort of latch on to the crossbox and then just lever down into the pin and kind of wedge themselves in place. So if those parts ever come in, I could just easily remove the engine like so and then just put it right back in place. And it actually does a fairly decent job of holding the engines in there. Now with all the wheels on, I gotta do a little sanity check. I'm gonna just bump on all the corners to make sure all four wheels are touching and it's sitting level. Now there are four little locating tabs here to set this rear fender on, so it's gonna fall into place perfectly every time. That is it though, guys. Pending a parts delivery, this thing is actually considered done. Oh wait, hold on. I always forget something. Now, it is finally done. This thing went together like a dream. Everything fit, I had zero problems, and it looked amazing. So if you guys want to build one of your own, hit up this dude right here, Outlaw Trophy Resins. I will have a link in the description.